from the Asian Community Development Council. This is Family in Focus, Mondays at 12 noon on PHLV Radio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Family in Focus, a podcast brought to you here on PHLV Radio by the Asian Community Development Council, or ACDC. We're live every Monday, giving you topics that are of interest, of course, to the Asian American Pacific Islander community here in Southern Nevada and beyond. So today we're talking about a topic that's definitely very close to my heart, because a lot of you may know that I'm originally from Thailand. My whole family still lives there. And this past weekend was very special because it celebrates Thailand's Father's Day. It was actually the birthday of our late king, Bhumibol Adulyadej, and he passed away a few years ago, but people still celebrate this as the national holiday, Father's Day, because it was his birthday. So, normally it's a celebration around the world for Thai communities around the world, including right here in Southern Nevada as well. So I thought, with this being a special holiday for the Thai community, I wanted to bring some very special people in the Thai community here in the U.S. and here in Southern Nevada to join me for a conversation. So today I've brought with me some very special guests. We have in the studio with us Dr. Christian Giovanni. She's actually one of the new commissioners on the Asian American Pacific Islander Clark County Commission, AAPI Commission. So welcome to the show, Dr. Christian. And also we have Assemblywoman Cecilia Gonzalez. She is with Assembly District 16 here in Las Vegas. She's part Thai, and so is Dr. Christian as well. And also we have Sue Tamavongsa. She is a Thai community ambassador and also a singer-entertainer here in Las Vegas. And she's also part Thai. She's a lot of different Asian communities. We're going to talk about her identity crisis, she called it. So we're going to talk about that coming up in a little bit. But first, I wanted to welcome Dr. Christian to the studio. Thank you so much for being with me today. And Christian, I've known you for quite a while now. I've known your mom as well. Yes. And so talk to me about, her role and your role here in the Thai community, because it's gone back many, many years.
Yes. As we've discussed before, my mother was one of the original pioneers. She came here in the 70s. And her and my father started their family. And in the process, of course, at that time in the 70s, there was no Thai community at all. There was nothing. So my mother and the original settlers came and, they teamed up and started the first two Thai temples here, which the first one is Wat Phut Pavana, and the other one is Wat Ba, which you're very familiar with. And, she started a newspaper, the Las Vegas News, which I still run to this day. It's 22 years old now.
Wow.
And how my mom actually united the community was through the newspaper. She would help people get their businesses and their events, and when they had events, my mom would take photos, and this was before Facebook, of course, so that was the way to get your face out and get people known. And so people who knew my mom through the newspaper, they would recognize her. Wow, you're Oiwan. I feel like I know a famous person. So, they'd get their photo, and my mom was such a sweet, friendly person. She would say, come on in, get a photo with me. Let's get you in the newspaper.
Right.
And that's how the community started, with her uniting people through the newspaper, starting the temple, because that's where they go to get together and, embrace their culture, because they're so far away from Thailand.
And I know we're talking about Father's Day celebration. I know your mom's Thai, your dad's Italian, right? But I'm sure there's such a big celebration every year. When your mom was here, I know she passed away a few years ago, but, when she was here, was that a big part of your life, of going to gatherings to celebrate Father's Day?
Not when I was younger. I can resonate with everybody, all the guests on the show, because it's no secret that I look more Caucasian. And honestly, I was accepted by the Caucasians and not the Thai kids. So I didn't really go. But there was a point where I came back from college, and then my mom needed my help because her health was declining. So that's when I started to get more in the community. And of course, I took her to all of these celebrations, and it was beautiful. I was embracing the other half of me and the full half of my mom.
Yeah.
And it was really just very culturally beautiful.
Because that's kind of what's really a big passion for your mom too, right? And I think sometimes we don't appreciate, that aspect until maybe we get a little bit older. So, and that sounds like it was your experience.
Yes.
And, let's hear from Cecilia and Assemblywoman Cecilia Gonzalez. You, similar to when we were talking earlier with Dr. Christian, your mom is Thai, your dad is Mexican, but you said when you were growing up, people, you really didn't know what to identify with, even though your mom was born in Thailand, right? And that was a big part of her identity.
Yeah, so my mother was born in Bangkok, but my family's originally from Chiang Mai, and that's where my grandmother grew up for a majority of her life and before they migrated to the States. And my father, my biological father, is Mexican. And unfortunately, due to incarceration, he's been gone my whole life. And so growing up, I was very embedded in my Thai Asian American side. Kind of like the doctor was speaking about, going to the temple was the only place that I knew other Thai people growing up. I was very embedded in Thai dancing and performing during Thai New Year's down at Chinatown during the ages of like 8 and maybe like 14. And, that is really where I found a sense of community. I would go to school and there's kindergarten pictures of me and everyone's smiling and I'm sitting there with my hands like this, right? Because in Thai culture, like that's how you say hello. That's how you say, and so it's just very funny. And when I went to school, I actually brought my Thai teacher who taught me Thai dancing to kindergarten because I was so nervous to go to be around like in American school, right? And it was just a very interesting journey growing up. I'm half Thai, half Mexican, but when you look at me, right, I'm very racially ambiguous. And so I don't think people first look at me and think, oh, she's Thai, right? My name is also Cecilia Gonzalez, right? And so I think maybe like, my last name and the way that maybe I look, folks automatically think Latina. But I'm very proud to be both. And it's very amazing to have such beautiful cultures to be proud of. But growing up, it really was difficult. I wasn't, how the doctor was speaking, Thai people and the community here wasn't really big until maybe the last like decade, I would say, in my experience. And so, a lot of my friends were either like Filipino or they were Vietnamese or they were Japanese, right? I wasn't a very like highly populated identity growing up. And then with being Mexican, right, I don't speak Spanish. I grew up speaking Thai. And so it made it difficult to kind of connect with being a Latina growing up. And so I kind of had like an identity crisis really until maybe the last couple of years. And identity is always changing, right? But I didn't feel like I was Asian enough for the Asian folks, and I didn't feel I was Latina enough for the Latin folks. And so I really just hung out with as many Black and brown folks as I could growing up here in the community.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it shaped, what you're doing today as well. We'll definitely get back to that. And Sue, I want to bring you in because, we're talking about this identity crisis and the blended, and you have an interesting story because, growing up, you were born and raised in New York, right? And then just how did that kind of shape how you thought about who you were, and then the surprise you found out later on?
Absolutely. Growing up upstate New York, school was full of majority of white and blacks. I mean, there maybe was one other Asian person. And so for a long time, I thought I was white. No one ever even mentioned the Asian word until I moved to Las Vegas. And that's when I got bullied, actually, and started getting these racial slurs of being Asian. And I wasn't even worried about the names that I was being called. I was more baffled with, I'm Asian, and I had to figure that out because when I was born, my parents were just in the States for a year. And I think they utilized me as kind of a gateway to learn the American culture and the American language. So even though I was exposed a little bit to the Thai and even Laos culture, music and dance and clothing, majority of my time was spent just learning American English and American culture for my sake and for my mother and my father. So I didn't grow up around a lot of Thai communities. And like Cecilia said, I didn't hang out with a lot of the Thai, nor a lot of Asians either, because again, I think I was still struggling with trying to find out who I was. So a lot of my friends throughout high school even were still white, Hispanic, Black. You know, it wasn't until a year ago that I found out I'm also now part Japanese. And it made the total sense because in the Thai Lao community, I always get asked, you don't look Thai, you don't look Laos, you know, where are you from? And it kind of baffles me. It throws me off a little bit when I get that question because I would say I'm from Buffalo, New York. But to fall upon the fact that I was part Japanese about a year ago, it kind of connected all the dots for me because now I can see the Japanese in myself. And I kind of want to, my next year goal is to kind of follow those roots and see how deep I can go with that, just to learn more about myself. But it's definitely been a culture shock transitioning from the East into the West Coast and finding out who I am. The Thai community here has definitely grown in the past decade. I've been meeting more and more people. And I can also tell that with the new generation, we all kind of have similarities where the younger kids aren't speaking the language nowadays. They're spending a lot of time with the culture. And, you know, I highly encourage that we still do practice our cultures when we can, because it's something that can never be taken away from us. And then we just learn a little bit more about ourselves every day.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know, Dr. Christian, you've been part of this community for so long, especially, you know, a lot of people in the Thai community. You helped started the Thai Culture Foundation here, right? So you really wanted to make sure that people kind of hold on to their roots. So talk to us about that experience, especially you're bringing your own experience into it and how you became kind of the leader in that realm.
Okay. Well, actually, it just fell upon me because there are a lot of young children that want to learn the culture, but there's nowhere to go. So a bunch of moms came to me one day and said, "Hey, Dr. Christian, our kids want to learn dance, but we don't have any place to go." And there was a place, but it just didn't work out. So I said, "Okay, how can I help?" And they tell me, "Well, this is what we want." And what they wanted was their children to have a safe place to learn about culture and dance and get to know other Thai children. So I made that happen. And one of my biggest supporters was Auntie Vita Lin. She provided
of ACDC.
That's correct. She provided a place and a lot of support at her ACDC building, and that's where it all began with my ideas, the willingness and the desire to learn from the moms and the children in the community.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you, still part of that. You now as part of the commission, the AAPI commission, and you work with other commissioners from different groups, obviously. But you're the only Thai and the first Thai, right, Thai, on the commission, as far as I understand. How is that? Why is that so important to be kind of taking? Because it is a commitment, and you're already so busy as it is. But to be part of that commission, why is it so important to you?
It's important to me because I am actually the first representative for the Thai community. There never has been one, and I feel that it's one of the most underserved communities that needs a voice, that they need somebody they can come to say, hey, we want a cultural center, or this topic is important to us, and I need to be able to convey that to the board, and we need to do plans to see about making that happen for the community.
Yeah, and it's so important. Cecilia, and I want you to chime in on this because in your role as an Assemblywoman, you can really play a part to really kind of amplify our voices as well.
Yeah, thank you so much that you bring that up. On my first day in office and my swearing in, unfortunately, folks couldn't attend because of COVID and because the building was closed down, but I wanted to honor my heritage, and so I wore a traditional Thai skirt. And I can't tell you how many people texted me, people that I didn't even know were Thai were texting me or messaging me like, I'm Thai too, and I saw your dress, and it just meant so much to see our culture being represented, right? When I would go and knock on doors, I can't tell you how many Thai people I ran into, or people that there was one experience where I was knocking on doors, and it was an apartment building, and the family had opened the door, and I was looking for the son. but the grandma comes to the door, the mom comes to the door, the father comes to the door, right? And it's a 2-bedroom apartment. And I just think back to like growing up, how like that was my family, right? And so seeing that Asian family at the door, it almost like reminded me that like our communities deserve to be represented, and that I'm part of that, right? I'm the first Thai person to be elected in our entire state. And that's a huge honor to display our culture and display how we've been in the community, right? I have a friend, Dr. Mark at UNLV, who actually wrote about the Thai cuisine.
Right, Mark Padungpat. We've interviewed, and he's wonderful.
Yes, and so when I was a student and I learned about him and I learned about his research, I was just like in awe. Even last night at the gala, seeing little Thai girls dancing, I'm like, that was me dancing, right? And it just was a reaffirmation in, I feel like, what has been an interesting journey of finding our identity. And so I think it's very important. I also speak Thai, and so being able to communicate, that was very important growing up. My family, I think, also struggled with trying to help me in my educational journey, right? I just remember my grandmother always saying, math's the only subject I can help you with because I don't understand anything else, right? And so making sure that I uphold those traditions as well has also been very important.
What's been really special is that ACDC held its inaugural fundraising gala, Inspiration, on Friday night at Paris. And I know Cecilia was there, and also Sue, you were there. And talk to us about the feeling that, we were all dressed up in Thai traditional outfits. And that was pretty special, right? So talk to us when you walk in, you see like Cecilia and me wearing our Thai dresses.
It's that camaraderie that you see, a sense of welcome, especially for me. I arrived by myself. I could not get an extra ticket to invite a friend because the gala was sold out. And, shout out to ACDC because this event was pulled together in only 2 weeks. And it was such an amazing night on Friday to walk in and see the representation. The amount of Thai people, or the amount of people I saw in Thai culture wear was a lot more than I expected. Usually when I go to these events, it's myself and maybe one other person. I'm just so proud that we're able to represent and show off a little bit of our culture. And as one person told me, we were showing off our bling because our jewelry is so bright and shiny.
Yeah, that's true. And Cecilia, I love it because you brought your mom to the event as well. And I'm sure she had a blast, right?
Yeah, my mom loved it. She was also very excited to see so many people dressed up in our traditional wear. And when we were getting ready, I was actually helping her put on her wear. And I think, in our culture, our elders are very important. And so it was a very special moment for me to get ready with my mother.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's just so great to see. And I love that. And, the reason Dr. Christian and I really connected, and Dr. Christian, I want you to talk a little bit about this, because I got to know your mom when she was still here. And she was just so proud of, the Thai food when she would cook for us, and when she would go to events and promote like Thai-related events. How are you kind of carrying this forward and kind of carrying her legacy? You think that, this community will come together more because of what you're doing in the community?
The community is pretty united now. It took a long time, and as Sue and Cecilia mentioned, that they noticed that there was really no Thai community. It's growing since the past decade, which is true. It's always been there, but they haven't come out, and so people weren't aware of it.
Yeah.
And it's growing. It's getting out there, and I feel that my mom and her friends, the original pioneers, had a lot to do with that, with their restaurants, my mom's newspaper, the events that they would put on for fundraising to, improve the temples. And I'm just, all I'm doing is continuing their work. That's it. I don't take credit for what they brought here, because without them, it wouldn't be here. Maybe at least not that far out. It may have just started now if they hadn't come here in the 70s. So I'm just helping the younger generation. In fact, we're recruiting younger kids now to continue that. Ever since COVID, they've been, a little bit leery, but now they're ready, and we want more younger kids. So get the word out that the Thai Culture Foundation is welcoming new students to dance for big events for ACDC and other organizations that promote cultures from around the world.
And that's why I think this kind of conversation is so important, because we're getting out kind of beyond just the maybe immediate Thai community, right? We want to get the bigger community to kind of recognize that we're here, and we want it to make sure that our culture is out there. And Cecilia, I know, and we've talked about this before, about how there are still challenges out there, especially when it comes to your, district, and talking about the economy, because Asian Americans, we've always, and I mentioned this at the gala as well, of how, all of that myth of being the model minority, right? Like, we're not affected by these things. But you see that in your real life, that Asian Americans, and including Thai Americans, are affected by, the impact of COVID and beyond. And these are the challenges that you're still facing, right?
Yeah. I can say during COVID, I was unemployed. I was actually running for office, and I was unemployed. But I was passionate about being a voice for our community and making sure that, one of the reasons why I wanted to run for office was because we actually had became the first state to have a female majority state legislature. But when I looked at the state legislature, I didn't see myself represented. And something that I actually study and write about is the model minority myth, right? And so I think because Asian Americans has been a very umbrella term. There are so many different things that our different communities face, even if we just talk about the way that our communities have migrated to the U.S., right? And we were also the first community that actually had a legal immigration law, right, that excluded us from migrating to the U.S., right? So when we talk about Asian Americans and our experiences, it's unique. And so even, I think that a lot of people do get caught up in the model minority myth, and that we don't experience issues. We need healthcare, we need language translation, we need access to affordable healthcare, right? And at the gala, right, a lot of that was highlighted through a lot of the work that ACDC did, reaching out to the community with food assistance, with vaccine assistance, with translation, to just getting information out to people, right? And I think that it's beautiful that we are being able to see that more now, right? No, and it's just so important to have people like, Dr. Christian representing at the commission, of course, you at the assembly, the district, and, just reaching out and hearing from the community. And Sue, it's just kind of helping to wrap up this conversation. What do you feel like, in 2022, just looking forward, what you want to do? What do you think needs to kind of get out there about our community, especially what you've learned about yourself, and just kind of wanted to make sure that our voices are heard? What more can we do as a community to do that?
I think right now we're making a good stride. We are connecting more with outside communities on our culture and the things that we get involved with. What I would like to do, because I do know a lot of our community still has a lot of parents, senior citizens who practice our traditional ways, and who are comfortable with just staying within the circle. A lot of it is education, but at the same time, it's about feeling safe, going out there and sharing our comments and feelings about certain things, our opinions. And so I like to be a voice for that, for the community, to help send that message along. Also, I would like to focus on education for the Lao and Thai community. There are some statistics out there that some of the graduates within the Asian community are in the Lao and Thai community, where the percentages are high. And so what I would like to do is reach out in education purposes to encourage those to stay in school and possibly provide a scholarship to continue on to college.
No, that's really wonderful. And before I end it with Dr. Christian and Cecilia, what do you want to see? What do you want to accomplish? What's your big goal for next year, especially when it comes to, the Asian American community?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
A lot, right? A lot. For you, just this one person. You can do it all.
I definitely agree with Sue and her comments about education to our community and outreach. I study the school to prison pipeline, or what has been termed as the school to prison pipeline. And it's really the intersecting of the education and the criminal justice system. And there's this notion that our community is not impacted by the system, right? And just like Sue was stating, an issue that I have found in my research is that a lot of our data, right? So just our information of how we classify ourselves is always aggregated. But when you disaggregate the data, you do start seeing disparities, like Sue said, amongst Lao people, amongst Thai people, amongst Vietnamese folks. And so that's something that I hope to bring into the conversation, is that our communities do experience punitive discipline policies within our schools, and how can we, creating a scholarship, creating a community, maybe after school program, where our community can feel welcomed and safe as well, but also reaffirmed that they belong here. Because I think the notion is that growing up, at least for myself, I was always the other, right? And even within the Asian community, I was always the other Asian, right? And so I really look forward to bridging that gap along with Sue in education and outreach, and just making our community affirm that we belong, and that we're proud to be here as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure Dr. Christian, as we...
High five, sister.
Yeah, right? As we're ending this conversation and everything we're talking about, I'm sure you're already thinking about, as part of the AAPI Clark County Commission, what do you want to kind of take away from this, and what do you think we need to be thinking about moving forward?
Moving forward, what I would like to see happen in the long run is I would like to take away all stereotypes, and I would like it to be equality for not only Thais and Laos, but all Asian denominations. Just take away the stereotypes, see the complete equality, yet with the equality, they can still embrace their culture, where they came from. And like Cecilia said, everybody belongs here. America is a melting pot. Just come here, be equal, but embrace your culture. There shouldn't be bullying. There shouldn't be denominations, because in the end, we're all human beings, no matter what color you are or where you come from.
Yeah.
So that's my ultimate goal. That's what I'm working on.
And I think all of you, Dr. Christian, Assemblywoman Cecilia Gonzalez, Sue Tamavongsa, you're such a good blend of what we're trying to talk about here, is that we're all so complex, right? We're all coming from many different cultures and backgrounds. Even though we all have this Thai as a common denominator, we also bring a lot of other experiences with us, which makes this community so great, especially, the Thai American community here in Las Vegas. And thank you again to all of you for coming on the show today to share your experiences and what makes us so special, especially on this really special time as we celebrate Thai Father's Day in Thailand and around the world. So thank you again to all of my guests today joining me on Family in Focus, brought to you here on PHLV Radio by ACDC, and we'll see you again next week.